Rope lighting. You guys are really stuck on rope lighting. Who asked that? Who asked rope lighting? You did? Oh, in the back. Yeah, we're going to talk about lighting in a second. Give me a second there. That wasn't a question, by the way. That was a statement. And you kind of yelled it out like you yelled it out like maybe you got a medical issue I should be concerned about. So, this picture. One of the reasons that I said one of the houses that looked most appealing to me was the one that had the most junk in it. A lot of times, one person's trash is another person's treasure. Like I said, just by removing the junk out of a house, you can do fairly well. I had an opportunity to purchase a house that I completely renovated. And I might have told you part of this story the first couple days. It was a house that I bought for $40,000, and I had to clean the whole thing out. Now, people were bringing up the question of the freezer, and I'll kind of go into that now. I bought this house from a gentleman that grew up in the house. His parents raised him in that house, and they've since passed. Like I said the other day, not in the house, but they've since passed. And he just couldn't bear the fact of living in the house anymore. He missed his parents. His life has kind of changed. And all the stuff that his parents left were still in the house. And so when I looked at it like a pile of garbage, a pile of trash. And I really wasn't motivated to buy the house. So, but he kept pushing me for a price. So in my mind, I'm doing exactly the formula that I talked about this morning. And I discounted it majorly to get all the stuff out of the house. The house was probably worth $120,000 as it stood. And I said, well, I'll buy the house if you'd sell it to me for $40,000. Not thinking that he would, but if he did, I thought, hey, I got a deal here. Well, not only did he take the $40,000 price, and I closed on it, he was able to get $40,000 and move on. But he said, John, I'm going to leave everything in the house because it attaches me to my parents, and I'd rather have you deal with that than me. Okay, great. I had no idea what I was getting into. None. So I made about, give or take, about another $40,000 on selling the stuff in the house, and I'm not kidding with that. I got the house for free. Bought the house for $40,000, sold all the stuff, had about $40,000. As a matter of fact, we found some pretty weird stuff in there. We found gold coins and rare coins that we sold for, I don't know, that was $4,000 or $5,000 of it. I have this Engelhart silver bar. Who was I talking to about silver bars yesterday? Nobody? I was talking to somebody. I've got this pure silver bar, Engelhart silver bar, that we had found. I don't know if his parents hid it in the basement rafters or whatever it was, but we found that there. I found a 1967 Honda Glide motorcycle in the basement that had 16 miles on it. I sold that to a collector for X amount of dollars. Like 3 sets of Encyclopedia Britannica that was from the 70s that I sold for a bunch of stuff. Anyway, I've got these plates. I still have them. We haven't sold them yet. Do we still have them? Is she there? Yes. We still have them. I got like 25 of these plates that are collector's items that are still in the box that we have yet to sell, but we're going to sell those. But what's that? Don't forget the tools. Jewels. Oh, yeah. How can I forget? Oh, my gosh. The jewels. So we found like under beds and in closets and in ceiling panels and all this stuff, like the silver bar and the coins and we found all these bags of jewels. I swear it was like a treasure, sunken treasure kind of thing. So I found these jewels, I put them aside, and Heather and I went downtown Chicago one day and we said, you know what, we're going to take the day off of work, we're going to take all these jewels and gems and bring them downtown and get them appraised at a gemologist. So we were kind of excited, spent the day down there, and I think the first gem, there were bags and they were, I forget what kind they were, but they were a bunch of them. The first one he brings out, the very first one What he quoted how much? Like $1,500? Okay, it was something like $1,500, and I'm like, oh my God, we are rich. This is unbelievable. I'm like, we got more of these. This is unbelievable. Well, the other ones I think totaled another like $1,000, but altogether it was about a pretty hefty sum. Not as much as I was thinking at first, but a pretty hefty sum. The point I'm trying to make is and I'm going to talk about this freezer in a second. The point I'm trying to make is do not discount trash, because underneath it may be a treasure. You see all these shows, American Pickers and all those shows, that they take all this crap that I would think is crap, and they, one of the things that was in the basement was what we call a coffin cooler, a freezer, coffin freezer. And I noticed that it was down there, didn't pay any attention to it. And the guy that I bought the house from was kind of a guy that, let's just say he was kind of down and out on his luck, so to speak. Okay, wasn't working and just, had some life challenges. And so he really didn't take care of the house very much. Well, I didn't realize this, but the coffin cooler, the first time that I went down there, was unplugged. And it got unplugged while it was full of meat. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm going to try to maintain myself here. So I had to call in a separate crew just to deal with that. It was unbelievable. But that's some of the things that you're going to have to deal with, possibly. But don't ignore the trash, because there can be gems in that thing. That house on the corner, hey, I'll make you an offer on the house and you leave everything in it. You leave everything in it. I know for some of you that sounds like, why would you want to buy something like that? I bet there was a newspaper from 1956. If they're holding on to stuff like that, there's stuff all over that house, right? Remember, that was something that where somebody had passed away and the children, I think, inherited it. Hey, I'll take the house and everything in it, right? Who would do that, by the way? Show of hands. Who wouldn't do that? Okay, yeah, I know Mark's like, no, I'm not touching that, man. I don't care what it is. I ain't touching that. I got you. So don't ignore the trash. Make sure that you take a look at that, because there could be treasure laying there as well. Let's talk about tear down and frame up. Let's talk about old house issues. Now, houses here that we saw yesterday, we saw some that were built in the 50s. I've rehabbed houses that were built in the 1800s, okay, and also newer. So I've seen a wide variety of things. Be aware that you don't always know what's inside the walls. Proceed with caution. Now, Charles, when you were doing your rehab, did you find anything crazy in the walls at all? A lot of interesting stuff under the floors, such as no bodies, right? Not human bones, Charles, right? Not human bones. Okay, right, Charles. We're on camera here, right? Thank you. He didn't want to say no. I'm not going back there, man. So when you open up walls, sometimes you open up issues. So remember to keep that in mind, okay? Drywall. I personally like to pull it out in big chunks. Where's our drywall guy at? Right here. So when you're doing demolition, if you can pull those drywall chunks out in big pieces rather than the little pieces, that's going to save you some time. Yes?
Just a point on drywall. Pre-1980, there's a good potential for asbestos in drywall mud.
Quite possibly. Right. And again, that's something that...
Just wear a mask, it's all right.
That's something that your inspector should point out. They usually list that when they're inspecting the house on that possibility, so absolutely. You've got to look out for those hazards. What's that? The Chinese drywall. When we were in Atlanta, everyone was talking about the Chinese drywall. And while we were down there, the Chinese drywall on a couple of houses that we were going through actually came out and grabbed a couple people. So it's a dangerous drywall to work. That's a joke, people. No drywall grabbed anybody. I'm just letting you know. You're like, did a drywall grab somebody? I never heard of that before. Yes?
A bit of a personal question.
Yeah.
Morally, how did you feel about, you're buying this house from this guy that's down in his luck.
Morally.
No, legit. Like this is a legitimate question,
Right.
And you give him 40 grand or whatever
Right.
for the house, and then you find 40 grand of his parents' stuff.
Right. Right.
How do you deal with it? Or like
Morally, I felt great. You know what I mean? Because I'm a real estate investor. And you know what? He lived there for 50 years in that house. If he didn't want to take it and sold it as is, I'm glad to help him out. So I felt great. Matter of fact, I slept great that night. His problem wasn't the stuff in the house. It was the stuff in the house. He didn't want it. There was some kind of an attachment to it. He didn't want the house at all. So I worked a number that was, as a real estate investor, I said, hey, if you sell that for 40 grand, I'll take it. I'm doing him a favor. I'm helping him. Why? Because I'm a giver.
Yes, we know that about you.
But I felt great because I'm a problem solver. That's what I was solving his problem. I'm serious with that. Yep, serious with that. You cannot, when you get a good deal, you can't feel like you did something bad because nothing was bad there. We solved problems there. And I really mean that. You may feel at first, wow, I got a really good deal on this. I made a lot of money. I'm going to give some of that money back to him. Now, some people may do that, and that's great. I decided not to do that, but some people might. Okay? Yes? I absolutely did. Absolutely. Yep. And I asked more than 3 or 4 times. So I'm buying this and everything in the house. Yep, I'm going to walk away from it because I didn't want to take anything that was his. Okay? Plaster and lath. A little bit more of a detailed type work than drywall. Plaster guys are kind of going by the wayside. It's hard to find good plaster people. So if you're in a house, like Charles's house, where you may need some plaster work done, it may take you a while to find somebody. Have you found someone for that house, by the way? Okay, so is he an old timer, been around a while? Oh, is that right? Right on, man. Maybe he can get some of those skeletons from the crawl space. 2x4s, if you're taking down a house, sledgehammer those out, pretty easy there. I'm really good at demolition. I'm terrible at putting things back together. Okay? Different framing. When you take apart walls, you may want to consider framing things a little bit differently. Is there an opportunity to open spaces up? I see that in a lot of houses when you walk in the front door, especially those houses that were built in the 50s that we saw yesterday. Well, one of the things that is a style today that wasn't back then is wide open spaces. Okay, so maybe there's an opportunity to make the kitchen and family room kind of combined with a little bit of a peninsula as a bar there. That's very hot. Or maybe even open up the ceilings a little bit and raise the ceiling in some of those homes. If you can walk in that front door and it feel bigger, or you can make that space feel bigger, I think that's important. Do you have a question?
Some of the people might have noticed that in the Chandler house yesterday. When you walked in the front door, really closed, the kitchen was to the right, and it was a single entry, and the fridge door opened into it. Exactly that thought. Open it up.
Open it up. Make it bigger and make things customized. When you can do, now this would be appropriate for a house that's a little bit higher end, like for instance the house that was in the neighborhood where prices were $115 to $290. You might be able to do things with cabinets to make the appliances look built in, give it a little bit higher end look that doesn't cost you a lot of money. So if it's appropriate for the house in that market, I would take a look at that. You got a question? Okay. If you need a question. You need a question, Ann? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, if you can just resurface the doors and the hardware, just even the hardware on the doors makes a dramatic difference to cabinets. So if it's appropriate to the area, appropriate to the market where you don't need high-end cabinetry in there, by all means, just do that. Absolutely. Yes. Ken. Well, the asbestos hangs out with the Chinese drywall people. Yeah, I think you should use a certified contractor for that if you've got, asbestos in wrapped pipes and things like that. We talked about asbestos the other day, friable and non-friable. So there's a lot of health and safety that may go on with that. Asbestos isn't an issue until you disturb it and it gets in the air and you breathe it in. Okay, so make sure that you're dealing with, if you have that in your home and you've got to demo it, make sure that you're either using a licensed contractor, or if it's a real tiny job that you don't need that type of thing, make sure you're wearing the proper protection. Yeah, typically in every municipality, if you call their landfill, they'll tell you what to do with it. Sometimes you got to wrap it in special, what they call yellow bags. And depending on what it is, whether it's friable or non-friable, sometimes you can just throw it into a roll-off box if it's non-friable asbestos. If it's friable, you're going to have to put it in the yellow bags type things, but they'll direct you accordingly there. It depends how much you have, but you're going to probably pay by the yard, and it's probably going to be about $300 a yard, something like that. 200 to 300 maybe. Okay. Okay. Here's the other thing. Notice that in some of these houses, when you'll take down the walls, you saw this over at Charles's place. You saw where they walled up some of the windows that were in place there. And, it was probably appropriate to the time, but in today's world, we like big windows and that let a lot of light in. Now, one of the things you got to be concerned also with is the area. So you see a lot of areas that maybe are changing, or in more of a challenged area have bars on the outside of the windows. Whether that's going to, take place at Charles, I don't think so. I mean, I didn't think the neighborhood was all that bad. I mean, I grew up in Chicago, where I see a little bit different activity happening there. Probably more occurrences of activity, I guess is a better way to say that. But you should really be deciding whether it would be worth it to open windows back up to make them bigger, brighter, or open rooms back up. Make sure that you're doing that if it's appropriate for the area and the house that you're working on. Does that make sense? Okay. And obviously you're not going to put high-end windows in there if it's a rental and you're looking in that lower end range, 150 and less. Okay. You're not going to go out and buy top of the line windows. If you are in an area that you're concerned about crime or challenges like that, security system goes a long way. Or if you have a tenant and you'll say, have the tenant kind of be more aware that, hey, this is an area that you might want to be cognizant of locking the doors, locking the windows, setting the alarm, that type of thing. Questions with that? Okay. So let's talk about bearing and non-bearing walls a second. When you're opening up walls, you've got to make sure that it's non-bearing. A bearing wall is going to hold and support the weight for the rest of the house that's on top of it. If you start to take down that wall, you're going to have a structural issue. So you want to make sure that you're not dealing or tearing down a bearing wall. It should be non-bearing. Non-bearing you shouldn't have an issue with. If you have any questions with that, you may need to bring in a licensed contractor or even an engineer, a structural engineer, to help you out with that. Charles, did you have any issues with that at all? Didn't look like it. But they were non-bearing. Okay. Okay. Now, this second statement is kind of tailored towards Charles's job. Starting new is often better than just kind of fixing a few things. Okay? You may want to, and that looks like what Charles pretty much did there, is he scrapped the whole thing and started fresh with electrical, plumbing, drywall, flooring, lighting, that type of thing. When that thing gets done, it's going to be very nice. Sometimes when you're doing a rehab, if you only focus on a couple things, it leads to other problems down the line. Okay? So sometimes it's better off starting new than kind of piecemealing the thing together. Okay? Make sense? All right. New framing. This is a house that had a very low ceiling, but now you're able to, by putting in a new roof, raising it a little bit, this may be an example of when you're in a very diverse area. For example, that corner house where the houses went from 115 to 290. Doing something like this in a great room gives it more space. Of course, you're adding more cost, but it gives it a feeling of a much grander house. So if your budget is appropriate and you've worked the numbers, you may want to look at doing something like this. Again, this is a little bit more major of putting in, cathedral ceilings or higher ceilings, but if it's appropriate to the area, I would recommend doing it, especially at the time of a market where you're kind of at the bottom and you're expecting the prices to rise over the next, say, 5 years. I think that might be something that you want to look at, but only if the market is appropriate to it. If they're all entry-level homes and there's not one home over, say, 130,000, 140,000, you probably wouldn't be doing something like this. Make sense? Okay.